virtue of the authority entrusted to me, I hereby constitute this assembly as a legal congregation of the University of Pretoria. During this assembly, degrees will be conferred with all the rights and privileges associated therewith. And we will look into the names in the program and confer the degrees as the Dean will present them. Please be seated. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and I would like to heartily welcome you to this autumn graduation ceremony of the Faculty of Law. I also wish to welcome the Dean, Professor Borey, and Deputy Deans, heads of departments, and our special guest, Professor George Mbedi, the Dean of the Faculty of Law at the University of Johannesburg. Welcome here, Professor. We, ladies and gentlemen, have a special day today, and it gives me great pleasure to officiate at this auspicious event. And again, on behalf of all of us here present, I wish to congratulate all of you, our graduates, on achieving this important milestone in your lives, and of course, also in your field of study. And it pleases me to see what I would usually call this Red Sea. You know, there's a Red Sea, there's a Black Sea. Those who study geography will know. There's a Black Sea there, there's a Red Sea here, and I'm very happy to see what the faculty is doing in terms of producing these worthy graduates up to doctoral level. And of course, if you have been an undergraduate student over the past 4 years, I mean, I'm certain that this was not a very easy task for you. And university studies in themselves are not a walk in the park, as people would say. And apart from the required aptitude, I mean, it takes perseverance, self-discipline, self-control, self-belief, and many, many hours of good and hard work that you should sustain in order to succeed at the end. And for this reason, some of the students who have enrolled with you are not graduating with you today, probably delayed by another year or two, and others may have fallen along the wayside because it is hard work with many, many challenges. And of course, apart from the many challenges of university studies, you may have faced quite a lot of turmoil and class disruptions, and extensive nationwide student protests, especially since 2015. And I see here among you some of the student leaders are graduating who were part of that. And you may even have been among those advocating for free higher education. And of course, I, for one, am glad that we have put that behind us and that students have been able to resume normal academic activity alongside a large component of in-sourced manual labor who now earn competitive salaries, and this phasing in of free higher education for the poor from 2018 is one of the achievements. Perhaps we don't know whether it will have a long lifespan, but nevertheless, I'm glad that you are here. I served in that fees commission advising Judge Hare for 18 months. and I'm intimately involved with the recommendations there because we know the economic shape that we find ourselves in as a country. But we are happy that you are here with us today graduating. You face the normal academic and unusual societal challenges, but you face them head on in these past few years, and you stuck it out, and that's what makes you today the graduate that you have become. And facilities and access to facilities at some point was quite a challenge on this campus. But at the same time, we wish to commend you and also, the support that you got financially and academically, and of course emotionally, and the commitment that you have shown. We experience a lot of challenges. Many people don't know how complex it is to run these universities, because you meet tens of thousands of students from different backgrounds, and some are under emotional stress, psychological stress, require counseling, support, well-being. Some students get to a point where they actually become suicidal. So it is quite a daunting task to be able to have reached this milestone. And we're happy that you're here. We're also grateful for the outstanding work that our academic staff members have done to actually produce the results that the university required of Professor Borrain. I can relate to many meetings in the executive when we held him to account and meet the targets and do all sorts of things, including producing the required research. And today, we're happy to see that happening. And these academics give a lot of time, their knowledge, and of course, more importantly, their capacity and love for teaching, coaching, and mentoring. And I want to emphasize that many of our academics do this work because they love it. And many, cutting-edge lawyers, as you know, are in the corporate world and they make money. And we have people here with superior knowledge who are selflessly teaching you, coaching you, and ensuring that you contribute to the society in the manner that you do. So we are very grateful, Mr. Dean, for the work that you do there with the faculty staff. And although we have this focus on academics, the university, as I say, is quite complex. You have a large component of administrative staff, and some of these people do a lot of hard work. If you see this hall and this organization the way it is, it's because of our administration, who work very long and hard hours, and others process your marks, and we have to check all the integrity. They work on financial aid, libraries, all of this whole support that makes you who you are today is as a result of many, many efforts of different kinds of people at the university. And of course, I don't want to forget staff who are actually taking care of the health and wellness of our students. As I said, that is an emerging stress for higher education, that more and more of our students are encountering serious difficulties. So I also wish to thank them and those that work with students with disabilities. We have quite a sizable number of disabled students here, and all the support, safety and security staff as well, in our residences and everywhere else, so that your children are intact. They are your children. To me, they are students. And today they are graduating at one of the top-notch universities in the country. So, ladies and gentlemen, without too much waste of time, it would have been, I think just a word of advice to our graduates that, of course, it would not have been able, because, of you graduates who graduate today, if you did not have support from your family, your loved ones. And I cannot really forget them in my speech, that your friends, your sponsors, your family, these are people that actually supported you when we were not there, minding our own business in the university. And a lot of them are here today, and I also wish to thank them for that. And of course, our academics, as I said, under the leadership of the Dean, we are really, truly honored. And of course, I think all of you deserve a round of applause. At this morning's graduation ceremony, we will be conferring 483 degrees. 483 degrees. Those are the number of hands I should be shaking, Mr. Dean. So, and God have mercy. And this includes 19 doctorates and 102 master's degrees and 362 bachelor's degrees. And dear graduates, as you are promoted to the status of tax law graduate today, you can take pride in the fact that you have graduated from one of the best law faculties in Africa and indeed the world. In October of 2017, the Council on Higher Education, in its national reviews of the LLB degree among all 17 law faculties or schools, awarded UP Law Faculty full accreditation alongside Nelson Mandela University and the University of KwaZulu-Natal. And Mr. Dean, I wish to confess that that had nothing to do with me being the chairman of the Council on Higher Education. It was independent work, and congratulations. But further than that, the remaining 14 faculties still have to sort themselves out. They must do it right. And in 2017 again, Times Higher Education World Ranking, or subject rankings, awarded this faculty, position 92 among 1,000 universities in the world. So this is an affirmation of the academic standing of the faculty on the international rankings. And this is serious business, because this matters. And the academics of the Faculty of Law at the University of Pretoria continue to make significant contributions to the development of various fields of law, including emerging new fields, both locally and internationally. And with its world-class centers of excellence, institute clinics, research chairs and units, a strong focus on Africa, a respected body of alumni, highly qualified lecturers, and strong publication record sought after undergraduates and postgraduate programs. And in this faculty, we have no less than 15 NRF-rated researchers, and that is 25% of the academic staff complement, and that is quite significant. And the faculty's contribution to the legal scholarship have been, a serious boost to the university, but also to this society. That as you know, our society is a bit sick. I want to digress a bit, but this is relevant to you because I now remember. 3 weeks ago, I was with President Ramaphosa and a few other people for 8 hours in some meeting I will not mention. But a good friend of mine was there as well. And this is Judge President Dunstan Blambo of you would know who he is if you're a law graduate of Gauteng North and South. And he said to the president, Mr. President, you know, we have serious challenges in our profession. The courts and the legal fraternity ends up doing the work they shouldn't be doing because we get distracted. So the core business of what should be done. And what he meant was, as politicians, stick to your politics and sort yourselves out and not come to these courts and create more problems for us. And I think that was something that the president had to hear, but I guess he's not the one that's running to court. So these are the challenges that you will be facing, whether you want to defend corrupt politicians just in the interest of making money. I think it's unethical. And so, ladies and gentlemen, while we are committed to academic excellence, I mean, we're also aware that good education continues. So do not stop now to learn. Continue to do what you have to do. We know that some of you have encountered many friends here. Some of you have got probably Miss Right or Mrs. Right or maybe Advocate Right, however you want to call them. But these universities produce families. We have among us here, you know, very old people who met their partners at these universities. So it is that kind of an environment. Now, the 72, I just wish to quote something here. Especially, we have observed, some of us, that when students graduate and find jobs and start earning money, some of them forget their parents. They forget people that actually contributed and sacrificed a lot to actually help them. Now, remember your parents. It is quite important that you look after them because that brings you blessings as well. The 72-year-old controversial Serbian performance artist Maria Abramović wrote a small paragraph and said, once Picasso, you know Picasso, the fellow, the artist with the nose. Once Picasso was asked what his paintings meant, and he said, do you ever know what the birds are singing? You don't, but you listen to them anyway. So sometimes with art, it is important just to look, reflect on it, and make sense for yourself. And it will be some form of therapy to you, because as a lawyer with all these tensions and good books and everything else, you might need some distractions. And art is one of them. Music is another. I can mention a lot of them that you know. So I'm confident that you'll be able to walk out here today with the core values of this university firmly entrenched in you, and you will seek to continue the learning every day and face the challenges, you know, with all the intellect and the power and the capacity that you have learned here. And I close with the words of one of my favorite Austrian psychotherapist, Viktor Frankl, who was a survivor of the Holocaust. And Viktor Frankl says, live as if you were living a second time, and as though you had acted wrongly the first time. So, which means make your life worthy. We say at the University of Pretoria, make today matter. Because when today matters, tomorrow is another today for you, but it will also matter. And I would like you to please join the community of proud and active tax alumni and use this network to keep in touch and actively plow back into the lives of deserving and needy students. In other words, when you start making money, don't forget us. That's all I'm saying. So we need your injection as alumni and other people to assist another generation of students to achieve what you've achieved, because in many ways you have also been assisted. And I thank you for your indulgence. I will now request the Dean and the supervisors to introduce to me the candidates present whose names appear in the program.
Mr. Vice Principal, the supervisors will now introduce the doctoral candidates.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Agada Akogwu, who has complied with requirements for the degree Doctor of Laws with a thesis titled Assessing the Human Rights Implications of Nigerian Law Dealing with Sexual Orientation, prepared under my supervision. In his thesis, the promovendus provides a detailed analysis of the array of legislative enactments by both the federal and state governments in Nigeria that constitute the country's sodomy laws. The thesis investigates the human rights implications Nigeria's anti-homosexuality laws pose under the Nigerian Constitution and international law. The work dismantles the cultural, religious, and moral justifications that form the tripartite basis upon which the Nigerian government often rationalized and increased criminalization of consensual adult homosexual conduct by adducing legal, philosophical, and scientific arguments to discredit the flawed premises. The study makes a substantial contribution to knowledge by providing a framework for legal reform towards the decriminalization of consensual adult homosexual conduct. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Laws with all its associated rights and privileges to the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Ndatega Victoria Ashila, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Laws with a thesis titled Towards Responsible Lending in Namibian Consumer Credit Law, a comparative investigation prepared under the supervision of Professor Renke and with me as co-supervisor. In her thesis, the promovendus evaluated the adequacy of the primary debt prevention measures under the Namibian consumer credit legislation in protecting consumers from irresponsible credit granting and over-indebtedness. Benchmarking the Namibian consumer credit regulatory framework and its reform initiatives against the leading international best principles, the thesis found that current debt prevention measures are inadequate in protecting consumers from irresponsible credit lending and the risk of over-indebtedness. In a comparative investigation, the responsible lending regimes in South Africa and Australia were considered. Drawing lessons from the international leading best principles and the comparative investigations, the thesis proposes the introduction of responsible lending measures in Namibia's consumer credit legislative framework, in addition to the current primary debt prevention measures. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Laws with all its associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Marta Magdalena Bradley, who has complied with requirements for the degree Doctor of Laws with a thesis titled An Analysis of the Notions of Organized Armed Groups and Intensity in the Law of Non-International Armed Conflict, prepared under my supervision and that of Professor Jan Kleffner. In her thesis, the promovenda set out to determine the meaning of the notions organized armed groups and intensity under Common Article 3, Additional Protocol 2, and the Rome Statute. These notions serve as fundamental requirements necessary for a situation to constitute a non-international armed conflict and therefore trigger the application of the law of non-international armed conflict. The results of the examination do indeed promote a better understanding of these elements, but the promovenda cautions that the benchmark tests inherent in these notions call for even more refinement and legal certainty. This thesis contains the most detailed interrogation of the elements of the intensity and organization that currently exist in literature, and as such, represents an original contribution. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Laws with all its rights and associated privileges.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Anil Karo de Beer, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Laws with a thesis titled Peremptory Norms of General International Law, Jus Cogens, and the Prohibition of Terrorism, prepared under my supervision. In her thesis, Peremptory Norms of General International Law, Jus Cogens, and the Prohibition of Terrorism, the promovenda explored whether the prohibition of terrorism has attained the status of a peremptory norm of international law, a norm of general international law accepted and recognized by the international community of states as a whole as a norm from which no derogation is permitted. It found that prohibition of terrorism meets both the criteria for and the characteristics of jus cogens under international law. It further found that the prohibition of terrorism as a jus cogens norm has had an effect on certain other jus cogens norms, notably the prohibition on the use of force. This work makes a substantial contribution to legal scholarship by comprehensively addressing the role of jus cogens in the rules of international law relating to terrorism and illustrating that new jus cogens norms, such as the prohibition of terrorism, can emerge in response to contemporary challenges. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Laws with all its associated rights and privileges.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Tigist Desu Gebriwot, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Laws with a thesis entitled Intellectual Property Law, Food and Agricultural Law, and Food Security, prepared under my supervision and co-supervision of Professor Lisa Corsten. In her thesis, the the Promovenda investigated and evaluated the existing international institutions, treaties, and conventions governing food and agriculture in addressing food security. She also used the data case of Southern African communities, particularly the San experience, as a classic study to serve as example of how the most vulnerable communities of the globe are affected under the current global food system. Her argument was firstly based on the hypothesis that existing intellectual property law applicable to plants, genetic resources, and associated traditional knowledge has failed to adequately protect and recognize the right to food. Secondly, she argued that the existing system governing food and agriculture is non-representational of the vulnerable communities and ordinary farmers. Her study involved a comprehensive examination of these two hypotheses and contributes to the field of food law by addressing these obstacles to food security. Mr. Vice Principal, I now request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Laws with all its associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Elizabeth Cornelia Janssen van Rensburg, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Laws with a thesis titled A South African Perspective on the Meaning of Beneficial Ownership in Article 10 of the OECD Model Convention on Income and Capital in the context of conduit company treaty shopping, prepared under my supervision. In her thesis, the Promovenda examined the interpretation of beneficial ownership, this requirement in South African double taxation treaties, in the context of tax avoidance structures involving conduit companies receiving cross-border dividends. The Promovenda considered the approach to the interpretation of treaties and analyzed the meaning given to the expression beneficial owner in international literature as well as South African law. Drawing from her findings, she proposes a meaning that South African courts are likely to consider for the term beneficial owner in South African double taxation treaties. The study provides valuable insights into the approach that South African courts will follow in interpreting both this and other undefined terms in double taxation treaties. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Laws with all its associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Monica Wanjiru Kareti, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Laws with a thesis titled Historical Legal Analysis of Woman-to-Woman Marriage in Kenya, prepared under my supervision. In her thesis, the Promovenda sought to establish the legal status of woman-to-woman marriages in contemporary Kenya. Although several Kenyan communities still practice woman-to-woman marriage, in an attempt to forestall the recognition of Western-style homoerotic same-sex marriages, the 2010 Constitution of Kenya stipulated that an adult has the right to marry only a person of the opposite sex. The thesis argues that a purposive reading of the Constitution, including its recognition of culture as an important value of Kenyan society, leads to the conclusion that the constitutional stipulation was not intended to prohibit woman-to-woman marriage in Kenya. The thesis recommends that the relevant arms of government should employ measures to achieve the unequivocal legal recognition of woman-to-woman marriage in Kenya. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Laws with all the associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Yolandi Meyer, who has complied with the requirements for the degree of Doctor of Laws with a thesis titled International Law and the Responsibility of Multinational Corporations for Environmental and Human Rights Abuses in the Extractive Industries in Africa, prepared under my supervision. In her thesis, International Law and the Responsibility of Multinational Corporations for Environmental and Human Rights Abuses in the Extractive Industries in Africa, the promovenda conducted an analysis of the international law framework applicable to multinationals, in particular to human rights violations and environmental harm caused by the activities of multinationals. The thesis focused on a specific concern in African states, namely extractive industries, due to the fact that many of the current rights abuses by multinationals seem to occur in this industry and where the problem of lack of regulation seemed to be most concerning. The study makes a substantial contribution to knowledge by approaching the problem of regulation of multinational corporation through the prism of state responsibility for the acts of multinationals. The study proposes a strengthening of national institutional frameworks to address the challenges currently faced in regulating multinational corporate activity. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Laws with all the associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Gerrit Cornelius Miller, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Laws with a thesis titled The Nature of Personal Group Life Insurance Contracts in South Africa, prepared under my supervision and with Professor Steve Cornelius as co-supervisor. Group life insurance has long been established in the insurance industry worldwide. In this thesis, The Nature of Personal Group Life Insurance Contracts in South Africa, the promovendus provided a comparative analysis of group life contracts with reference to American jurisprudence, English law, as well as South African law. The study makes a contribution to and provides insight into the complexities and unique nature of group life insurance contract. The English common law rejected the doctrine of contracts for the benefit of third parties due to the privity of contract principle. It necessitated the legislator to enact legislation to allow third parties to enforce terms of a contract which purports to confer a benefit on such party. Roman law did not accept the validity of a stipulatio alteri, but Roman Dutch writers developed the concept which was later accepted into South African law and is now established in our jurisprudence. Group life insurance contracts in South Africa do not fit into any of the different theories in respect of the construction of contracts for the benefit of a third party, and as such, group life insurance contracts are unique sui generis contracts. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Laws with all its associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Karonga, who has complied with the requirements of the degree Doctor of Laws with a thesis titled The Right to Development in Africa and the Requirement of Development Cooperation for its realization, prepared under the supervision of Professor Danny Brandt and with me as a co-supervisor. In his thesis, The Right to Development in Africa and the Requirement of Development Cooperation for its realization, the promovendus contributed significantly to the discourse on human rights and development by bringing sufficient clarity to the concept of the right to development in relation to development cooperation. Contrary to conventional understanding, he argued that development cooperation is counterproductive to the African conception of the right to development. He justified the argument with an elaboration account of the African origin of the right to development, which he pointed out does not imply a solicitation for development assistance, but an assertion of the right to self-determination, which guarantees entitlement to formulate alternative development policies. The thesis opens a new dimension in looking at the right to development in Africa, not only as a human right concept, but importantly as a development paradigm with the potential to improve well-being for the people of Africa. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidates.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Laws with all the associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Violet Odala, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Laws with her thesis measuring the conformity of the Malawi child justice law against contemporary interpretations of international and regional instruments under my supervision. In her thesis, the promovenda offers a contemporary overview of the normative framework for child justice law provided by international and regional instruments and the Malawi Child Care Protection and Justice Act of 2010. New features in the Act were assessed in the light of General Comment Number 10 of the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child and the 2013 UN Model Law on Juvenile Justice. Generally, the Act does comply with these instruments. It establishes one of the best diversionary procedures in the region, making Malawi a best practice example and is potentially one of the most progressive laws globally as it prohibits imprisonment of children. However, certain gaps still persist in the broader normative framework for the child justice in Malawi. Malawi's child justice jurisprudence is still in a state of development, and there is also a lack of academic critique. So the promovenda's research is expected to be a catalyst for ongoing critical analysis. The thesis is the first academic account of the evolution and status of the child justice legal framework in Malawi, making an important contribution to the field of child justice in Malawi and globally. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Laws with all the associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you William Thomas Oosthuizen, who has complied with the requirement for the degree Doctor of Laws with a thesis titled Reconciling Patient Safety and Liability, Lessons from a Just Culture, prepared under my supervision. In his thesis, the promovendus investigated the confluence of patient safety and medical liability. It advocates for the adoption of a systems approach to error, inclusive of safety or a just culture constructs as employed by other safety-critical high-risk industries, It contends that altering our conception of accountability to align with a system approach not only holds the potential for safer care, it also allows to assist in healing harm through initiatives grounded in restorative justice theory. This study constitutes a substantial and important contribution to and development of the law relating to patient safety in South Africa. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Laws with all the associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal. Sorry. Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Jeannick Andrea Pretorius, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Laws with a thesis entitled The Protection of the Natural Environment in Non-International Armed Conflict under International Treaty Law, prepared under my supervision and that of Professor Jan Kleffner. In her thesis, the promovenda identified and analyzed the treaty law rules applicable to the protection of the natural environment during non-international armed conflicts. The focus in particular was on the interplay between international humanitarian law with selected treaties of other relevant areas of international law, namely international environmental law and international human rights law in this context. The first part of the thesis focused on determining whether or not treaties in these areas of law continue to apply in non-international armed conflicts. Once this question was answered positively, the thesis examined in an original way how these treaties apply, as well as the role they could play in improving environmental protection in non-international armed conflicts. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Laws with all the associated rights and privileges to the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Malcolm Rutz, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Laws with a thesis entitled Competition Law Damages and Their Quantification in South African Law, prepared under my supervision. In his thesis, Competition Law Damages and Their Quantification in South African Law, the promovendus investigated the content, nature, and quantification of private damages resulting from contraventions of statutory competition law. Consideration was given to damages actions arising from contraventions of the Competition Act 89 of 98 and facilitated by Section 65 of the Act. The promovendus made certain recommendations which enhance access to the law and facilitates the vindication of the right to claim civil damages by parties including impoverished consumers affected by contraventions of statutory competition law. This work is a groundbreaking and a substantial contribution to the understanding, classification, utilization, and development of South African private competition damages actions, as well as the quantification of common law competition damages in general, and a valuable contribution to global competition law literature. I request that you confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Laws with all its associated rights and privileges of the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce you to Herman Katzentembe, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Laws with his thesis titled Problems Regarding Exemption Clauses in Consumer Contracts, the Search for Equitable Jurisprudence in the South African Constitutional Realm, prepared under my supervision. In his thesis, Problems Regarding Exemption Clauses in Consumer Contracts, the promovendus analyzed the impact of inequality promoted by exemption clauses in standard form contracts. The research traversed the depth of monopolistic traits and individual autonomy against the principle of equity in consumer transactions in South African constitutional democracy in order to sustain welfareism. The scholarly work immersed itself in the pathology of consumer rights and the fight against unfairness of exemption clauses that limit these rights. The study tried to harness and interprets national and international legislation that promotes and protects consumer matters. The theme of his narrative is of correcting private law justice from a democratic capitalist system driven by profit incentive to a natural law system driven by the promotion of human rights and dignity. This study makes a substantial contribution to scholarship on consumer education and better enlightenment on unfair terms in interpretation schemes. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Laws with its associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Martinus Jacobus van Staden, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Laws with a thesis titled Identification of the Parties to the Employment Relationship, an Appraisal of Teleological Interpretation of Statutes, prepared under my supervision and with Professor Christo Botha as co-supervisor. In his thesis, the promovendus investigated the interpretation of labor legislation and the question, who are parties to the employment relationship? The study describes the teleological model of interpretation and explores the 5 elements of interpretation that should be considered when interpreting the concept employee. The study found that legislation has become an indispensable source on contemporary labor law. And although the courts have adopted a teleological approach, it has not had the profound effect envisaged by the Constitution on the transformation of society. The study makes a substantial contribution to the existing body of knowledge in the field of social law, which aims to protect vulnerable groups of workers in South Africa and abroad. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree of Doctor of Laws with all the associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Faranaz Veriava, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Laws with her thesis entitled The Contribution of the Courts and of Civil Society to the Development of a Transformative Constitutionalist Narrative for the Right to Basic Education, which was completed under my supervision. In her thesis, the promovenda analysed whether the education litigation initiated by civil society organisations together with the education jurisprudence of the courts and the interplay between the two have contributed to the development of approach to the right to basic education in section 29(1)(a) of the Constitution that is capable of transforming the quality of basic education in South Africa's historically disadvantaged schools. The thesis established that the various tactical repertoires employed by civil society, together with the developing jurisprudence of the courts, have provided the foundation for a standard of review of the right to basic education that is substantive and content-based and is an approach to interpreting the right. The thesis concluded that such an approach is necessary to transform the quality of basic education in South Africa's public school system. Through a comparative study of litigation on the right to education in the United States, India, and Brazil, the thesis suggested that the developing substantive approach must be further enhanced at the remedial phase of litigation. And here the promovenda makes an important contribution by proffering that a dialogic approach to the determination of remedies that is inclusive of all stakeholders in the litigation should be adopted. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Laws with its associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Quraisha Bibi Ismail Suleiman, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Philosophy with a thesis titled The Development and Rise of Islamic State and the Violence It Manifests, a Theoretical Perspective prepared under my supervision. In her thesis, the candidate sought to interrogate the use of violence by IS, situating her explanation within the various templates of violence, and at its core, attempting to answer the question why this particular group has resorted to violence. This question is presented and examined by challenging the orthodox, read Western, interpretations of IS that situate its violence in some vague religious ideology, rather than as a response to the dark side of modernity. The study adopted an eclectic approach, moving beyond the conventional canon to produce work from a decolonial perspective. The study makes a substantial contribution to scholarship through its analysis of violence, the language used in othering, and the shift in analysis from the politics of religion to the politics of the state and the politics of violence. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Laws with its associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Joel Malesela Modiri, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Philosophy with a thesis titled The Jurisprudence of Steve Biko, a study in race, law, and power in the afterlife of colonial apartheid, prepared under my supervision. In his thesis, the candidate investigated the development of a critical legal and social theory of race with reference to the thought and politics of Black consciousness intellectual Stephen Bantu Biko. The central premise of the study is that despite the promulgation of a new constitution, post-1994 South Africa remains marked by the persistence, continuance, and resilience of colonial apartheid power relations, practices, and mindsets. The candidate drew on Steve Biko's theorization of race and racism, identity and liberation, read through the lens of critical race theory, to analyze the failures and limitations of law, human rights, and reconciliation in dismantling the material and symbolic vestiges of colonial apartheid and bringing about a liberated society. The candidate situated his arguments within an expanded definition of jurisprudence and contributed to deepening black radical thought in South Africa. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Laws with its associate rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, the following candidates have complied with all the requirements for the degree Master of Laws by Research. Michelle Deers with distinction. Gideon Gerber. Pierre Hubert. Molefi Porego. Mr. Vice Principal, the following candidates have complied with all the requirements for the degree Master of Laws by coursework. Colleen Blignout. Philomena Ikumua. Godfrey Maluleke. Selo Moima. Ndivo Nemosimbore. Mokati Noko. Mariette Redlinghuis. Tengetile Dlamini. Denayo Mulahutsi. Kyle Stanley. Candice Gibson. Maputi Gwangwa. Michelle Hawkins. Swelihle Mfeka. Yulani Visser. Pumzile Lakale. Nomtandazo Mnisi. Christopher Weyer. Marika Pinaar. Leona Bosman with distinction. Bertus Burger. Delia Chinyati. Johannes Hatting. Nalukui Kongwa. Bianca Maria. Pesisai Maririmba. Sandile Mshlongo. Minensle Moyo. Bianca Potgieter. Nwako Seremula. Michelle van den Berg with distinction. Sunel van der Linde. Goodman Wimba. Happiness Mnisi. Nandipa Nsaluba. Daniel Ribeiro. Ines Janse van Nieuwenhuizen. Privilege Shanana. Carissa Johnson. Kushinga Matswai. Konanani Raligi Ligia. Unjakuye Rukambe. Nicole Breen. Ferdinand Curran, with distinction, he also receives the Kuzijn Herzog and Dvorak Prize for the Best Student in the LLM in Child Law program. Zanele Masango. Linda Yotamo. Reason Baloy. Mina Matamotsa. Mariska Shrives. Yvonne Sikunyana. Gabriela Sercha. Anna van Skalkwyk. Christopher Jukes. Machi Marubela. Rebecca Muketsi. Samantungwa Kumalo. Gertrude Mafua Kwan. Happy Mkabela. Butonde Mulautsi. Karen Vel. Ialu Amulungu with distinction. Shepherd Huni. Ronald Lamola. Mtutukisi Malaleka. Priska Mudimba. Omaratile Sebola. Wilhelmina Shakela. Tristan Kutsia. Zawadi Dlambini. Sandra Prinsloo. Adel van der Walt. Suleiman Ibrahim. Mr. Vice Principal, the following degree Master of Laws by Research. Alicia Meyer with distinction. Hilda Venter. Mr. Vice Principal, the following candidates have complied with all the requirements for the degree Master of Laws by coursework. Iram Youssef. Carmen Lucas. Evans Malunga. Anthea Martin. Tebogo Moses. Galalelo Seguakwa. Michael Shackleton. Ketia Tambwe. Ngwako Toka. Geraldine Berger. Louise Etchell. Fatuani Mudemele. Natasha Swanepoel with distinction. She also received the Utah Law Prize for the best student in the degree LLM by coursework completed in 2 years. Monica Mpuka. Kweletemba Chuma. Noma Gugu Nyati. Mr. Vice Principal, the following candidates have complied with all the requirements for the degree Bachelor of Laws. Delano Abdul. Jenny Alberts. Melandri Alberts. Muhammad Ali Mia. Candice Anderson. Mpo Apane. Annerie Audi with distinction. She also receives the Johan Verloren van der Maat Prize for the best student in public law. Nicole Austin. Clarissa Basilio. Nadine Basilio. Reinet Besaidenhout. Akona Boloko. Nolokanyo Bonya. Shahiri Budras. Lanai Boshoff. Shama Boterere. Amalia Botha. Chantel Botha with distinction. Dieter Botha. Rulani Botha. Reinhard Botha. Dan-Marie Bouwer. Nadia Brits. James Brewer. Michael Bullock with distinction. François Burmeister. Samantha Buthelezi. Sibongile Buthelezi. Shanique Esleman. Nyarodza Shagwinya. Robin Champion. Tasneem Chan Gulam with distinction. Kusanai Charinda. Shrivar Chendip with distinction. Shuko Chikune. Rianda Chinner with distinction. Tambudzai Chiswo. Lauren Christie. Marlies Klute. Michael Koker. Anlu Kutsia. Eleni Konstas. Fiona Cowley. Melissa Cox. Daniel Cronje. Monay Cronje. Philip Cronje, with distinction, he also receives the Bliss Prize for the Best Student in Civil Procedure. Tiffany Kraus, with distinction. Shady Crowder. Demi Davis, with distinction, she also received the Norton Rose Fulbright Prize for the Best Student in Medical Law. Suzanne De Bruin, with distinction. Jared Akana, with distinction, also receives the Private Law Prize for the Best Student in the Law of Damages. Jana de Klerk. Herman de Klerk. Annika de Kok. Natasha de Kok. Paul Dendy receives the UNESCO Africa Chair in Education Law Prize for the Best Student in Education Law. Bradley Denton. Raina Devchand. Eunice de Villiers, with distinction. Cornelis de Waal. Elisma de Waal. Elzani Dickinson. Roxanne Dixon. Reboni de Kotla. Boikanyo Dirimelo. Michelle Dobson, with distinction. Michael Dono. Leila Duplessis. Ewald de Plooy. Sasha de Pria. Courtney Jane Easton. Sunay Els, with distinction. Courtney Elson with distinction. She receives the Goldenhuis Malachi Prize for the Best Student in Practical Law. She also receives the Private Law Prize for the Best Student in Child Law. Heike Endres. Tamara Engelbrecht. Michael Erasmus. Tienisse Estreisen. Leandri Vel with distinction. Zandali Fowler. Robin Feinstein. Michaela Ferro. Toza Fambat with distinction. Shanae Foxtrot. Jacqueline Freitas. Belinda Gerber. Paula Germeshuis with distinction. Patrick Gilliam. Bradley Goshen with distinction. Elsa Gous. Marsha Govender. Tasman Green. Louise Grobler. Sandra Gumbo. Bakiti Gumede. Samba Guate. Liesel Hager with distinction. Adrian Hanekom. Ilka Hartslief. Fatima Khatun Aswari. Anke Histerman with distinction. Jenna Hilton with distinction. She also received the Nexus Prize for the Best Student in Criminal Procedure. Jaina Hira. Aviva Hoekstra with distinction. Andrew Hofmeyer. Dale Higu. Thomas Higu. Bronwyn Iman. Connor Humphreys. Colin Isherwood. Megan Jacobs. Pierre Jacobs. Daniel James. Christo Jordaan. Latifa Kaider. Tinutenda Kakora. Bianca Kap. Nikita Keller. Stuart Kerr. Offensive Gabo. Maslafane Khatla. Vuyo Katide. Nkosingi Pile Koza. Tandeka Koza. Simpiwe Kumalo. Jacqueline Chiari. Anait Loppers. Martinez Koch. Amory Kok. Amber Koekemoer. Louise Marie Kotze with distinction. She also says the PPS Prize for the Best Student in Trust and Estates. Christian Krause. Daniela Koekhaart. Joyce Kambadi. Diyuti Lala. Adrian Lamprecht. Andrea Lawson. Lesiba Lebelo. Naledi Dloaba. Justin Lee. Sinji Lee. Chandri Lemmer. Maslaku Lesufi. Megan Livingston with distinction. She receives the Room Floating Trophy for the Best Student in Public Law 14 and 420. Emma Lockwood. Elzerie Lombard. Lanelle Lont. Zenita Lotering. Lianai Lau. Mtokozisi Lukele. Inga Matrakate. Sifiso Madunganda Daba. Nyasha Matya with distinction. She also receives the LexisNexis Prize for the final year LLB student who wrote the best essay. And she received the Chair of Banking Law Prize for the best student in the law of banking and financial institutions. Zanele Mashlangu. Lebogang Walobogwane. Naira Mohammed. Manda Makhato. Rebotili Makobe. Vanessa Malaki. Guisile Malinga. Pilgrim Mapa. Masetlake Mapochoshi. Leandri Marx with distinction. Marie Marx. Nsovo Mashisane. Reply Masinga. Rukutso Matanda. Tonderai Matanda. Retlametswe Matsejo. Motete Matsilili. Ja. Duduzile Mbata. Fezile Mbata. Daramika with distinction. Peter Myron. Adrian Meyer. Renate Meyer with distinction. Julia Michaelides. Tamron Michau. Jessica Miranda. Nonkululeko Mukachwa. Chuanelo Molaeng. Malosi Muabelo. Ele Mofokeng. Fatima Muhammad. Matabu Moaduba. Chepo Mokwena. Tuelo Mokoka. Ramatabata Molaba. Taylor Moorley with distinction. Arista Murtharam. Emma Morton. Releboele Motlong. Kutlo Mpusu. Nomyeso Mkele. Ayia Msindwana. Londeka Mchale. Bukosi Mtukushe with distinction. Lavon Miller. Belinda Mvududu. John Myers. Nomtandazo Muyeza. Roxanne Nagel. Rasni Narayansame with distinction. Shannon Nauschutz. Janice Nkube. Mpumelelo Ndledla. Reinhard Nel. Yemurai Nyamburo with distinction. Nonslelo Nchleku with distinction. She also received the UNESCO Africa Chair in Educational Law Prize for the Best Student in Education Law for 20. Refilwe Nkwe. Nonkosasana Nkosi with distinction. Jessica Nsenda. Matlatsi Ntloro. Longelo Nchangasi. Nonkululeko Ntuli. Sivanati Nayangane. Debbie Nianingwe. Janie O'Callaghan. Taylor Ann Odendaal. Momor Odunsi. Eloise Olivier with distinction. She also receives the Adams and Adams Prize for the best student, for the student with the highest weighted average in the prescribed modules during all 4 years of the LLB program. She also received the Harold Galasco Prize for the final year LLB student who obtained the highest weighted average in all the prescribed final year LLB modules. She will receive the award of the Vice Chancellor and Principal. The award consists of a silver medal as well as a cash prize and certificate, and is awarded to candidates for outstanding undergraduate academic achievement during all the undergraduate years of study. And she received the Grotius Medal for the final year LLB student who obtained the highest weighted average in all the prescribed final year LLB models. Rinal Padiachi. Madhya Patel. Dylan Patterson. Arjun Pachkari. Zinia Pero. Alexander Persaud van der Westhuizen, who shares the PPS Prize for the Best Student in Trust and Estates. Mashoto Fala. Mary Fasha. Mampiwa Pislela. Carly Apinar with distinction. She also shares the PPS Prize for the Best Student in Trust and Estates. Juan Claude Pinar. Wynand Pieterse. Saona Po. Karushni Poonen. Chulumanko Potja. Lenai Preek. Bradley Price. Kiara Quinn with distinction. Rainier Rademan. Cameron Raju. Jathin Ramnath with distinction. Catherine Randall. Asimina Raptis. Kyla Rollins. Michael Reinders. Willem Reinecke. Michael Ritter. Claudine Robertson. Gadiel Robertson with distinction. Angelique Roberts. Trevor Roberts. Bethany Robertshaw. Nina Robertson. Jordan Rodrigues. Anna Dean Rombolakis. Christoph Rood. Jennifer Roos. Elizabeth Rousseau. Gerda Roux with distinction. Peter Roux. Kalman Sajou. Megan Scanlon. Rika Skeepers. Michelle Skuman. Joseph Schroeder. Eric Schwartz. Progress Efemo. Puna Selesho. Seloane Seliane. Pauline Shabangu with distinction. She also shares the PPS prize for the best student in trust and estates. Mohsin Sharif. Malaysia Sheth. Celesani Sibanda. Sipesishle Sibeko. Emma Slomkowski. Bridget Smith. Michael Smith. Megan Smith. Kyra South with distinction. She also receives the Department of Private Law Prize for the Best Student in Private Law 420. She also receives the Delport van den Berg Prize for the Best Student in Deeds and Notarial Practice 410. Leandri Stein. Marie Adele Stein. Brad Strydom. Suvanya Trishnum Subruhen. Marko Sucevic. Sharnay Swart. Lenay Swart. Stefan Swart. Hilary Tangwane. Wonderboy Temba. Lauren Thomas. Angie Thompson with distinction. Sarah Thompson with distinction. Lauren Trefusis Painter. Lufuno Chikosi. Abigail Chuma. Tamsin Tustin. Michelle Ice. Marolien van Aert. Lysha van As. Alec van den Heever with distinction. Christo van der Bank. Zinta van der Linde. Marizel van der Merwe with distinction. Casey van der Velde. Janai van der Walt. Pieter van der Westhuizen. Tarin van Dijk. Albertus van Heerden. Madeleine van Heerden. Maarten van Staden. Roselia van Sail. Michael Veldman. Abraham Venter. Lauren Venter. Mariska Venter. Riandi Venter. Celine Venter. Elmarise Vermeulen. Andela Vilakasi. Jacobus Visser, Lyndall Foster, Savannah Vosloo, Mutke Avureni, Lutfia Vaya, Melissa Ward with distinction, Sydney Watson with distinction, Friederike Weber, Jason Wells, Anandi Werner, Sean Williams with distinction, Eugenia Winkler, Devalier Wouda, Mariette Wright with distinction, Montana Wright, Abiola Yusuf, Bernalie Zimmer.
I will now request the Dean to introduce to me the candidate for the presentation of the award of the Vice-Chancellor and Principal.
Mr. Vice Principal, I have the honor to introduce to you Ms. Eloise Olivier for the presentation of the award of the Vice-Chancellor and Principal Medal. Eloise Olivier complied with all the requirements for the Bachelor of Law degrees on the 30th of November 2017, and the degree was conferred on her today with distinction. She distinguished herself during 2017 as the overall top achiever in the Faculty of Law. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to present the candidate with the award of the Vice-Chancellor and Principal.
Thank you and congratulations to Ms. Olivier. Perhaps I should share with you, parents, that personally it always gives me great pleasure when we give these academic excellence awards to students. And we have them in various categories. And some of these we do at these auspicious occasions like graduations. And I think it is a sign of the dedication and hard work and commitment that our students have. We will now proceed with the program, and I would like us to At this stage, let us give our graduates a big hand of the hard work and perseverance that they have shown over the many years. And you know, Mr. Dean, I have been doing this kind of work for 33 years at different universities. And every year when we do this and we see graduates, you know, or students, you know, when they come at first year and they don't know their way around campuses, they appear lost, they have hurdles with their studies at first year, second year, and you see them today, and then you know that there has been a great deal of support for the students to be where they are. And therefore, I would like to ask all our graduates now to applaud their families and friends and spouses for the support they have been given over the many years. Thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the proceedings. And before we close, I wish to invite all present for refreshments afterwards. There will be marquee tents, I'm sure you've observed them as you were walking in, situated in front of this Rembrandt Hall. And at this moment, I would like to request you to stand for the singing of the national anthem and remain standing until the assembly has been dissolved and the academic procession has left the auditorium. The words of the national anthem are on the inside back page of the program. I don't expect that there's any South African who can sing this national anthem at this time and age. Our national anthem, please. By virtue of the powers entrusted to me, I now dissolve this assembly of the University of Pretoria. Thank you.